I think that once you accept the role as a man, a godly man, you have also forfeited the right to be unfit in any area of your life, mental, spiritual, and physical.
Well, hello and welcome to Kavod and the Man of God podcast. My name is Casey Wilson. We've got Travis Shook, Justin Bohner, and a special guest with us. This is Hicks. You might have known him as Joshua Hicks. Everyone calls him Hicks, right?
Yeah, nobody knows me as Josh.
We met you actually back at the Mayhem Classic in April, just a couple of months ago, and then ran into you again down at the TAC Games and started up a friendship and a relationship and thought, let's invite this guy up and hear his story and talk about life. And Justin got a hold of you and made that possible. And so thanks for making it up, man.
Absolutely.
We appreciate it. You are, what is Johnson City, about 2 hours from here?
About 2.5, without the traffic.
Without Asheville this morning?
Yeah.
And Johnson City, it's a small town, right? I mean, you're on the backside of the mountains there.
Yeah, I'm actually, my county is positioned between, my city is positioned between Johnson City and Bristol, where the NASCAR Speedway is.
So what did you guys do growing up? What was life like growing up in Johnson City?
I didn't spend much time in Johnson City because that's the big city. So, mostly just tipping cows and chewing on corn. I did a whole lot of car work, import cars, not muscle cars, a whole lot of street racing before the Fast and the Furious. So I'm dating myself again.
You were just mentioning your son's first project car, huh?
Yeah. I'm very proud of him. He bought a 2004 BMW 3 Series M Sport and didn't want any money from me. Said, I've saved my money. I want to buy it for myself. And here we are.
Done. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Heck yeah.
My nephew just bought a BMW. He's been into kit cars, so he was big in the Miata phase when all the young men were chasing Miatas.
Yeah.
Then he got himself a Beamer. And I think he's overall, he's got to be, 20 grand in debt in all of these cars.
So that is exactly the reason that I gave up sports cars.
Yeah.
It's not that I minded it was an expensive hobby, but I'd lose myself in the hobby.
Sure.
So I would, frequently work in EMS. I would pick up an extra 24-hour shift here or there and use that money to buy new injectors or, upgrade the turbo or something like that.
I think I was most impressed. I mean, men go through those phases with hobbies, but for a learning curve, for a 15-year-old, before he had his license, he was out there working on his car, and his dad was just letting him wrench and learn. Yep. And so, a young man getting to do that and experience it, everyone needs to go through that.
That's huge. My son's learning some hard lessons. He learned one the other day on something as simple as cleaning his mass airflow sensor.
Yeah.
Taking the air box out. It's a very tight fit. I'm not doing it. I can do it. I just needed him to bust a knuckle so he could go ahead and break the seal on that. So, yeah.
Well, Hicks, give us a rundown. How do most people know you? Paint a picture for your relationship with CrossFit, with Mayhem Hunt, a little bit about what you do, and then maybe dive into this redemption story that we want to talk through.
Absolutely. So I started in CrossFit on the medical team as a volunteer. 2015 was my first year, and I'm a very analytical person, very logistics oriented. So I tend to look at things in systems, and I would just notice things that could move a little better, be a little more efficient, and started developing some things. Would introduce it to the team. We'd use it. Went from a volunteer to a team lead, which is kind of like the director of the team. You got to be very careful with language because when you say a medical director, people think you're a physician, and I'm a lowly ambulance driver, paramedic. So I wanted to make sure that distinction was out there. So, I started doing that, developing these teams, volunteer-based teams. Went on to do regionals, a bunch of regionals all over the world, Madrid, Spain.
Post 2015.
Yeah.
Okay.
And up until 2018 when we lost regionals, and of course everybody knows 2020. And I started doing those things and developing systems and putting systems in play, and that started changing the course of how the medical team operated. Not just me, there was a group of us that did that, but just my thinking, I think, fit the team well. So we were able to kind of progress from there. And from there, I went on to do other events. Once we lost regionals, I started reaching out. Biggest break, Wadapalooza. Wadapalooza's probably one of my most challenging and rewarding events that I do in a year, just because there's so many different elements, unexpected elements.
You still do this?
I still
or
do it.
Wadapalooza, excuse me.
Yeah, we have one in Miami, and there's one in coming up in Huntington Beach in September. It'll be in SoCal, Wadapalooza, SoCal. But yeah, I just started. One of the things that I prided myself on, it's actually a phrase that we used when I was first introduced to the med team. The original med team lead, that he kind of guided me on this route. His name's Owen Volush. He's a firefighter in California, and he's really big on HIP. HIP, honesty, integrity, professionalism. And I've carried that with me everywhere, not just events, professional life, personal life, even.
That's good. That's
and
really good.
Try to push that out to the teams. And I think that we essentially have some of the best people in the sport on the teams currently, and they operate with honesty, integrity, and professionalism everywhere they go. Whether they're being paid, whether they're doing it just for the sheer love of the game, that's the type of people that we use. So started doing those in 2018. Conversations started doing 2019, and have never turned back. And I do the same job for the Rogue Invitational,
Okay.
and also for World Fitness Project.
Okay.
Love World Fitness Project. They are some really great people. That's cool. I was very happy. World Fitness Project tour stop one this year was in London. It was originally supposed to be in Mexico, but there was some crazy cartel stuff going on, so we had to make a last-minute decision to move it. We went there. It had its own challenges. It was great, but me, competition director, president, we all, the day before the event, we stood in the center of the floor and said a prayer together, and I got to lead the prayer, and that was cool. A highlight of my time with them. But a lot of like-minded people, a lot of good people.
Who's the guys behind World Fitness Project?
You got Jackson Terry, Jason Ansley he just got promoted, and he's doing all of the different operations because we're expanding. You got Will Morad. He's pretty much the designer and orchestrator of the programming and all of that stuff. But there's an entire group of people there, and I've not met one person that isn't passionate about the sport and also not a genuinely good person.
Yeah.
So
that's cool. All right. Well, that kind of paints a picture. Justin, you guys had a conversation, as you got to know each other. And why don't you take the lead on this, man, and draw some things out of Hicks that are helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't anything really mind-blowing. We reached out. I reached out to you to see, hey, if you had a platform to speak to guys. I mean, it's called the Man of God. Somehow we keep attracting like a couple of ladies here and there. I don't know if it's watching it so that they're with their husband sitting in the background or something like that. I don't know.
Enemy behind the gates.
Yeah.
Enemy behind the gates.
But if you had an opportunity to speak to men and have their undivided attention in a way, what's something that's passionate to you, that you're passionate about, that's something on your heart that you would want to get out to them? And you kind of just took me down this journey, really, on the phone, kind of how you came to be where you are right now, how you even got involved in CrossFit, how you got involved in really in walking with the Lord for real. We have a similar testimony of like, I always knew God was real. I just hoped he wasn't, so I could stop feeling guilty about the things I kept doing wrong. Yeah. Like that was my life, and I think we have some similar background there. But you just started really talking about this kind of transitional moment, pivotal hinge moment in your life where it was really as rock bottom as it could get, and then the Lord opened up a door in a very providential and I think a beautiful way to set you on this trajectory to be able to actually use that pit moment to propel you to be a witness and have a testimony now of what God can do through a broken man in setting him up to lead others and to love others and to be able to pray with the leaders of what's now an event that's probably going to be bigger than the CrossFit Games, if it's not already, in the World Fitness Project. And so, again, as we talked about before we even hit record, I'm sure that one of us might interject, but just if you could, as as well as you can, as you did on the phone,
No pressure.
walk us through, because I know because you communicated to me that this is something that you hold close to the vest that not many people know about, because as we said on the phone, there comes a moment where God holds up a mirror in front of you and you have to admit, I'm not the good guy in this story. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm the bad guy and Jesus is the good guy. And me being robed in his righteousness now makes me on the good side. But it's hard to let go of that dark moment. And so however you feel comfortable to, just share that story, because I think for a lot of guys, they either are in that dark place now or they're holding on to what God has delivered them through and from, which is actually the whole reason they went through that in the first place, was so that they could use the testimony of the deliverance through that for other people, right? And so just share a little bit about that story, and I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, I'll give you a Cliff's Notes of what led up to that moment, just because it's important.
Yeah.
As a lot of men are, or have gone through, I had decided that I wanted to go into paramedic school. Had a kind of downturn in the industrial side of the world, which is what I was doing before that. And during that time, as is a terrible statistic, but in first response, especially paramedic school, fire school, divorce is a pretty high thing. It's probably absence, probably a lot of things. So can't really speak to that. I know mine was more or less absence. That doesn't excuse the fact, but ended up in a divorce. Not by anything I did. I'm just going to throw that out there. I feel like I want to do that. But ended up in a divorce, had two small kids at the time. And during that time, it's a pretty dark point in my life. I've been raised in the church. I'm like the fifth generation of my family to go to my church. It's not that I didn't know God before. It's that I was intentionally ignoring the route. We were just talking about this earlier, but the road to hell's fun. Road to heaven's hard. So I took the easier route. Thermodynamics, the water takes the path of least resistance. That's kind of the way I went. Mm-hmm. Found myself at the bottom of a bottle for a long time. And I found myself one morning in the bathroom. I was getting ready to go to work, and I remember looking at myself and being like, my oldest daughter, I just remember looking in the mirror and being like, man, I hope my daughter never meets a guy like me. And then I had a real moment of clarity, because I said to myself, actually, I think I said it out loud. I said, God, I hope Alden doesn't turn out to be like me. Mm-hmm. And then that's a moment of, it's funny that you brought up the mirror. God holds a mirror in front of you, because that mirror was physically in front of me. And, here I am. I'm nobody's getting rich being a paramedic. Let's go ahead and face that. But I was doing well for myself. I owned my house, owned multiple cars, very popular, not bragging, but I had become that way, not for good reasons. But everything ahead of me was trending well to be in leadership in my career, and I was working a lot. I have two of the best parents in the world, and they had previously come from two broken relationships to come together, and I'm here. Kind of by the same act of providence that I'm now talking about. But they raised me in church. They raised me to be a good person. But they stayed and helped me raise my children through a very dark point in my life. And I don't know. I don't know if I could thank them enough. Mm-hmm. So, that's probably something I need to say to them. Not here. But anyway, they were there for me through that, and went to work. Probably a bad shift by most normal people's standards. It's another day at the office to us that have experienced it. So, I left the shift, still thinking about it. I had not stopped. I don't think I slept at all that night, not because of call volume, but just because I had that on my mind. And I decided, my parents are here. They got the kids. The mom's still in the picture. She's doing the best she can. I don't really have anybody. I'm done with this. And I made that decision on the way home that I was going to go home, finish off whatever whiskey I had. I like whiskey. I don't drink anymore. Not because I don't like it.
Because I like it too much.
Because I like it too much. Not that I have a problem with it. I just really enjoy it. And so I figured I'd finish that off and just go to sleep, not wake up. I won't go into too much detail about it, but that was the plan. And I remember driving home, and something was like, I'd been doing CrossFit about a year, and something was like, just catch the Saturday morning class. You can catch it. You're on your way home. Saturday morning class started at 9. I was off work at 8 a.m. It's like a 40-minute drive home, 35 if I went the back way. And I was like, all right, I'll just stop and do this workout. But on the way home, I said a little prayer out loud. And probably the most shameful thing I have from my past is that I did know God, and I intentionally ignored him. Yeah. And so I just had this little prayer to myself. Said, I'm done with this. This is the most I can deal with. I've reached some type of pinnacle here. There's nothing past this point. And the only thing I've experienced through this has been pain and suffering, and I just don't want to do it anymore. And if you got another plan for you, you better make it obvious to me, because I'm a dumb man, and I'm not going to pay attention unless it's clearly obvious. And shortly after that, started getting, hey, go do a workout. I don't think God's going to tell us to work out at this point. I'm like, I don't think God's going to tell us to work out, but whatever, I'll go do it. So I stop in, I do the workout, and it's important to know that the gym I went to was across the street, literally across a 4-lane that we call the Motor Mile, from another CrossFit gym that I wasn't a member of, but I was familiar with the people there. And the particular workout, I couldn't give you the exact parameters of the workout, but it involved an 800-meter run. And instead of going down through the cul-de-sac, we would run up the side of the highway. Super safe, I know, from a guy with safety.
CrossFit.
Yeah, CrossFit. And it's kind of like missing the snatch, landing on your knee. Still counts CrossFit. And so I went running. It's like an 800-meter run, and I'm going up the side of the road, and it's probably like my second or third round, and I'm just going through the motions. And I had some buddies driving down, and they saw me. They pulled into the turning lane, and they yelled. And this part is very important, and I'll explain why in a minute. But they yelled, "Hey, you need to go next door. You need to go to Thunder Valley. Rich Froning's over there. You need to go over there." And I said, "Oh, okay, cool." I'd been doing CrossFit, but hadn't really been watching CrossFit, so didn't exactly know who this guy was. I just knew he was in a couple of magazines. I was
and
like,
what
cool.
year was this? 15?
This is probably 14.
Okay,
yeah.
So this was like peak.
Yeah, peak.
Yeah,
Peak Rich.
Peak.
Yeah.
And I'm just, the only thing CrossFit did for me at this particular point was, hey, I'm not doing bodybuilding.
Yeah.
This is keeping my attention. Oh my God, I have abs. Mm-hmm. It was one of those things. So wasn't really. I've never really been big into sports, which is odd for me because I'm also one of the points I'm very proud of my father for is he's a TSSAA State Hall of Fame coach. Oh, wow. So I'm like, I've never been into sports, and which is odd. Mostly into cars and bad decisions and women, but that was kind of the route that I went.
Yeah.
And anyway, I said, all right, that's fine. Well, I started to run back to the gym, and I was like, I'm just going to run across. They have a 9 a.m. class too. It's probably over. He's probably leaving. I'll just run across. So I literally, in my clothes, sweaty, run across the highway, a 4-lane with a turn lane, so 5 lanes of traffic, and I go in, and Rich is over there, and I'm talking to one of the guys that was there, and I was like, hey, Chris, somebody said that Rich was here. He's like, oh yeah, he's in the back. He's getting ready to leave. And I said out loud, no, I don't want to bother him. I'll just go back across the road. And Rich heard me, and he was like, no, man, come on over here. Super nice guy. And if you don't know who Rich is, who you see is who he is. He's not putting on a facade. He's a real deal. And so Rich talked to me, and I mentioned in that conversation, I just got done with a 24, just trying to get a workout in, and he mentioned he'd worked for the fire service, and we struck up a conversation. Towards the end of that conversation, Rich said, hey, you should check out the CrossFit Games. They've got a medical team. Might be something you're interested in. And I was like, oh, cool, thanks, man. And so, we shook hands. I still have the picture. It's printed in my office. And anyway, because this is a defining point, not because I met somebody famous, but because I met somebody provident. Yeah. And that would be the word that I would use for him, in my life anyway. Also, I should also point at this conversation. Rich did not know any of this until about a year ago, and I made very specific parameters as to when I was going to tell him. And I'll finish that up at the end. But so I went back across the road, and I didn't finish the workout. I got in my car. Just a switch had flipped. Something was different, and I don't know what. But I went later on, and I got it was 2013. Because this was towards the end of 2013. And 2014, I got my level 1. And I decided that I was going to open a CrossFit gym in my hometown. And that shifted the route that I went. Late 2014, early 2015, the volunteer portal opened for the CrossFit Games. I put my application in. Like a week later, I was on the team. And I'm not saying I'm the best. I know I'm not. I've always believed that, and I tell everybody that I work with, if you ever think you're the best, you've just become complacent. So I don't think that the best is ever anything that you can achieve by your own standard. It is something that you strive for because you can get a little bit of excellence along the way. Mm-hmm. So that's what I try to live by. And I've missed the mark a few times. Ego sometimes takes over. And I have to pull myself back into check, but I think I've got good friends and surrounded my people that are not yes men or women. They are clearly capable of criticizing bad decisions. My wife is incredibly talented at finding all of my bad decisions and informing me of them. But no, my wife's a wonderful person who's changed my life as well. But
she's gifted in those ways.
She's very gifted. And anyway, so I went back, and a lot of the, when I worked the teams, a lot of the things that you see now at the CrossFit Games, and you could have seen it very well performed. This is something I do brag about this because it's something that I did, but I didn't cause this. Just the sheer effectiveness of what I created worked. But at the French Throwdown last year, they had an athlete that collapsed on the field, and there was a handful of judges that have worked with me at other events, and I came up with a drill that is protocol. Like, you usually have way less medical people than you have judges or staff. And treating somebody on a field like that is very open to the public. And there is a camera with instant access to the public in every hand. So I needed to find a way to preserve the integrity of what we do, as well as the humility and the dignity of the person that's on the ground. So we use the judges when we do a circle up drill. They come up and they make a barrier around them while we work in the middle. And then they did that, and I watched it happen live. And I was immediately online, like, messaging people, just wanting to give them my praise, like, hey, you did this good. And that came about because the two judges that were there had worked with me on my security team at West Coast Classic and learned the drill and asked me questions, and they took it there. And now it's essentially an industry standard. So I bring this point up specifically to say that I don't think I'm the best. I do believe that I have made an impact through the people that I work with, because they make a bigger impact than me, just in guidance and leadership and direction and stuff. But none of that would have happened if that interaction hadn't have happened. Because that was the end of my story. Yeah. That day was going to be the end of my story. And this is the first time I've talked publicly about it. And I'm going to come back to the Rich thing, because I told myself I would, because I'm working these events, I'm in close contact with these athletes. I would never tell him in that environment. I would only tell Rich, and this is going to date me as well, but I'd only tell Rich if I ever found myself in the barn working out with him.
Okay.
Which I was certain was never going to happen. And the barn at this point,
safe bet, right?
Yeah, and the barn at this point was at Senior's house. Rich has a barn of his own now.
Yeah.
Roughly a year ago, I was in the barn working out with Rich. And when we finished the workout, I asked him if he'd come over, and I told him and Froning the whole thing, the whole story. That was the first time. The second time I shared it was on the phone with you. My wife doesn't even know. So my parents don't know. And I think that comes up to another point that men struggle with on that, because we view that point of lowness as weakness. And it is weakness in essence of not wanting to travel forward on the path that you're on, but it does not it's not a negative character trait. It's just an experience. Yeah. And I think that a lot of men struggle with that, and they struggle with sharing it, because then it's viewed with shame. Yeah. Because that's what I had. And we had talked about this. You were very forthright telling me I don't need to bring it up. And I just wanted to let you know But I also saw the impact that it had on Rich and Senior, and I could hear the impact that the story had in your voice when you were talking about it, and we shared some things mutually. So I feel like it's a little powerful to understand that you don't write your story. You're not the author. You're a character in it, but you're not the author.
Yeah.
So to end the story early leaves some chapters unfinished.
Yeah.
And I believe that was the moment for me that shifted everything. And now that's my career. And it has given my family a life that solved so many problems that I had before. Being away from my kids for 24, 36. I mean, I worked EMS at a time where we didn't really have a state regulation on time, and I've worked a 96-hour shift before. And I didn't care because I was in it for the action, which, by the way, if you're getting into EMS, there's not really that much action. So you sometimes turn into a glorified cab service. And that's what'll eat away at you the most. But it was taking time away from my kids. Well, now I work events full time. So the only time I'm gone is event days. The rest of the time I work from home. And I have a 4-year-old now who sits under my desk in my home office while I'm working.
That's good.
And I'm involved with my son's new project car and my 10-year-old's love of art. And I'm there with my wife for dinner every night. And I clean the kitchen up because she cooks, because I'm really only good at chicken and rice. And my wife might as well be Emerald Agassi. So, I've now evolved my entire mindset around fitness, family, faith. And it's my gym's at home. I have a library at home. My wife, when I was still working EMS, frequently would make the comments that I've become a hermit because I worked when I shifted to 12-hour shifts, I'd work 4 on, 4 off. When I got home that last shift, my car didn't leave for 4 more days. It just stayed in the driveway because I didn't have a reason to leave. Yeah. Everything I loved was right there. Yeah. And I have a solid group of close brothers, and some of them are struggling now with certain things, but we bonded over this, and we continue. Yeah. And it's it's one of those things. I also take time. I go down to Mayhem because every single thing that is important to me is important down there. So I can go down there. Yeah. We talk about the Bible. We talk about these books, which is another funny story. But the books, I think they speak to this particular struggle. So that was something that we've always done. And the guys, I've let Rich, he's talked me into quite a few things, including mountain biking, which is new and difficult. It's not near. I found that mountain biking is not nearly as difficult when Rich is not on the trail with me. But it is a very fun experience to life that I would not have had. And I can't say that I push the sport further, but I have increased some safety standards, me and my team. And we got a standard now, and that standard comes back to that honesty, integrity, and professionalism. And I think that the first two of those, the honesty, integrity, a lot of men need to learn how to address that to themselves in that mirror. But so that's the start to it, nice. And that's the first public speaking of it. And I think the reason for that is I've been deeply guilty, felt a lot of guilt and a lot of shame over it. Kind of like, I should be tough. I should be able to withstand anything, but everybody's got their limit. I think your limit is drastically increased when you let God control it.
Yes, absolutely.
So your limit suddenly doesn't become much. It's just another obstacle to climb.
You have a different perspective on it, and our weakness is a strength. So when you know that you're completely ill-equipped to handle it, but he is, and you have a chance to display Christ in it, you view it differently, and it kind of takes the pressure off for you to achieve said thing. You're just like, all right, God, what are we going to do? Because there ain't no way I'm doing it. And it gives you a freedom to fail. And it also, what I've noticed here in the gym and leading my family and stuff and leading other people, whenever I'm not the person with the answer, or I'm not the person making the decision, God is. He might use me to lead. He might use me to speak, but it's on him. And so many times, something goes wrong. Someone looks at me and I'm like, all right, God, what are we going to do? And it takes the pressure off to move and to make decisions and to act and to react and do things because you're just doing your best to represent his love for us, what he's done for us. And then it gives other people the confidence to start doing it, to start failing, to start doing life, to start moving in that direction. I've seen so many men, they're like, I know I should love God. I don't know what the heck that means. How do I do it? How do I lead? How do I love? Like how do I do any of this? And it's like, just open your Bible and just start. And he'll tell you to run across a 4 lane to talk to somebody, and everything shifts.
Yep.
Like that's it.
I mean, I personally, I think, the brass tacks of your story is life was really hard, and you were trying to do it without God, and it had pushed you to the point of, for the enemy, he wanted just you destroyed, right? He wanted you gone. He wanted you to. You were on the highway to hell, but he really had you where he wanted you. Same in my story. The devil is most excited not just when he gets you to sin, but when he gets you to sin and the pleasure's gone too, because he revels in our misery. And so not only the sin, but when you are sinning and you don't even like it anymore, then he's really happy because you're miserable and you're going against God.
Yep.
And you had gotten to that place, and you were ready to be done with life, and you felt like the Lord wanted you to go do something as simple as a workout, and then all of a sudden you're running across the street talking to a guy that wasn't there to talk to you. And now look, you're alive.
Yeah.
You have a family. You love the Lord. You're following after him. You're able to influence other people. Like that's a big example that's probably not the story of a lot of men in terms of the kind of bounce back of where it took you to, but the reality of even in the darkest moment, even in the worst possible spot to be in for a guy, which we're all going to have that moment, either we have or it's coming. Yeah. God is faithful to have a guy at a gym for you to talk to.
Yep.
Have friends that stop to tell you. I mean, if you had started the run, the run 30 seconds later, they wouldn't have drove by when you were running by. Yep. I mean, God is so big, but he's also so good that he can take and redeem through people just talking. Like Rich was on his way to do something else. Yep. And
overheard.
God saved your life. Like I think about now, Jesus, I know he was doing things. It was a little bit different. Like it wasn't like he just had no idea what was going on. He's like, oh wow, I have really good timing. Thank you.
Yeah.
But like he's on the way to heal Jairus' daughter, and on the way is this interaction with the lady who just wants to touch his robe. And I'm not equating you to the woman and Rich to Jesus, but I mean, there's a way
CrossFit Jesus.
Yeah, for real. There is this principle that to be used by God is to open your eyes to see the things that he's already doing and join him in it. And it's something as simple as a man just being willing to have a conversation with somebody, which turned somehow in that conversation, you left thinking life is worth living. Through talking to a guy about being a firefighter and working out, you went from life is not worth living to life is worth living. That's a big decision to make by conversing with someone, right? But that's how powerful small interactions in relationship is. And I think so many guys are so burdened by the guilt and the shame of the low points and of their own sin that they're so curled. Martin Luther talked about sin is like the shell that kind of spirals inward, that sin curls us inward on ourselves so that we can only see us. And the Christian life is that uncurling that to where we can actually stop being so self-consumed and we can see people around us and what's going on in their lives and be a vessel of showing Christ's love by conversing with them. And I think that's just such a powerful picture that now you were taken out of that dark spot by someone having their eyes open to have a conversation, and now you're living this life of now your eyes are open and you're able to replicate that with other people. And I just think that's amazing to see on the big scale, but it's possible for guys on the small scale who aren't going to be the head of the medical team for the CrossFit Games.
Yeah. The, you know, I think, you know, you talk about the devil coming in and telling you, you know, making you feel bad about the decisions that you've made. There's a reason they call him the accuser.
Yeah.
Right. So he lures you into these positions that look like fun. And then when you're there, it's, oh, look what you did. Yep. You know?
Well, he's the accuser of the brethren.
Yeah.
Remember.
Yes.
He doesn't accuse the people who aren't in the fight for the Lord. Right?
Yep.
So if you're feeling the attacks of the enemy, it's a good sign that you're on Team Jesus.
Yeah.
Joey Martin said the birthmark of a Christian is a bullseye.
Yep.
And you're born into a war with an enemy.
100%.
Right? And so when you're feeling that attack and that oppression, just know he's not oppressing those who are on his team.
Yeah. And, you know, and it also says the righteous man falls 7 times.
Exactly. Yeah.
He gets back up.
Yep. You can't fall if you're you can't fall if you're already laying down.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was, you know, that's something that came to me when I was going through. And I'm also not saying that my story was like an immediate redemption. There was still a long path out of that hole. Okay? I mean, a long path out, and still had plenty of speed bumps in it. But it made me more durable as a man. Definitely gave me more resolve than I ever thought I would have. You know, my dad told me he kind of had a similar path. You know, he was in a bad relationship, got a divorce, and he went down that hard partying path. But he always told me, he was very clear about it. You know, as I got older, we talked about it quite a few times. But he was very clear about we wanted you in church because it is a lot easier to find a road you've once been on and come back to it than it is to try and blaze a new trail. So that's a good thing, but it was also part of my shame, right? Because I was experienced, I knew better, and I did it anyway. So, but I, you know, coming to understand that the entire situation and how I felt and how I was viewing myself was probably not coming from me alone.
Yeah.
So understanding that and being able to fight back's a very big deal. And, you know, I can't even remember the movie. I've just seen a couple of scenes out of it, but this man, he is visiting his mother in a retirement home, and she's got dementia really bad. And there's a moment of clarity where he says, you know, why he's frustrated with her condition and he's having to take care of her. And he says, you know, Mom, why are you even faithful? Look where loving Jesus has got you. And she has a moment of clarity where she comes back and says, that's cool. Well, look at your life. He says, my life's great. I have houses, I have cars. It's like, then why does the devil need to attack you? You're already where he wants you. Like, that is profound.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
you know,
that's huge.
So you said you knew Cliff. Like, how did you get the run in with the books?
that's a funny story too. So I'd been, you know, I know a lot of the guys down at Mayhem even before I got involved heavily down there, and they're all heavy readers, as am I. So I just happened to find this book on a website called Thrift Books. I'm weird about my books. I like buying old used books.
Sure.
You'd be amazed what you'll find in those.
Yeah.
I got a Robert Frost compendium. And when I opened it, there was a Parade article folded in it, nice and neat, pristine condition from 1985 about the author.
That's cool.
And there are handwritten notes by a professor in it. Like, where are you going to find that except a used bookstore? I love the way they smell. I love the way, and I like holding them. I'll still do an e-reader here and there, but that ain't the same. I need pages. So I'd got on there and I found this book, Day of War. And the only reason I found it was because I was looking for things. I'm into historical fiction. And I was looking for things that most of that's Roman. Yeah. And I like that. But I would dare say we have difference in theology themes. Yeah. And I saw it was about David and his mighty men. And I was like, oh, that's cool. That's my favorite books in the Bible. I'm going to get this and read it. I got like four paragraphs into that book and immediately text Rory down there. I was like, dude, you and Rich got to read this book. This thing's awesome. And he's like, what book is it? I sent him the name of the book, and he sent me a picture of like 4 copies sitting down there. I was like, man, we've been reading these, and I was like, man, I just found out there's a series of them, and I've got the second one, but I can't find the third one. And me and Cliff had to talk about that. But I got the third one.
He has a copy of the third one in the barn.
Yeah, we
saw it on the shelf when we were down there.
I got 1 copy of it, and I read it. And it was awesome, and I gave it to somebody, knowing good and well I'm never seeing this book again. I gave it to him, and then like 6 weeks later, there was a thing online about some company was going to produce it, like 200 copies or something like that. I bought it. It's like $50 too.
Yeah.
I bought it just because I have it. I still have it. I haven't opened it again, but it's like brand new. And but yeah, that's how I got in. Like, found the books. I do remember. I guess Cliff had stopped down by Mayhem one day, and he had literally stopped down the weekend after I was there, and I was so mad.
Oh, that's funny.
I was like, I missed him. And then when I was down at Mayhem Classic, we're going through doing all the checks and stuff. I had no idea you guys were going to be down there. No idea. And I didn't know any of you guys. But I saw the books come up on the display. I was like, oh, I got to go over here. So, yeah, and it's just funny how those things, I would like to take it back to the point that you were bringing up that men sometimes have a hard time reflecting outside of themselves. Mm-hmm. Like we'll kind of internalize everything, try to carry the weight ourselves, which is thus is the burden of a man, I guess.
Sure.
But I think it's important to know that God does talk to you, and he will step in sometimes like he did with me, and it'll be fairly obvious. But just because the door's open doesn't mean that every man leaves their eyes open to see the door. Mm-hmm. So I think you need to be open to that. And I have experienced these things through my career on more than one occasion where I would and there's a couple of times where I very clearly had a prayer going to an event like, hey, I got this person. I don't really want to deal with them. And I told you a little bit about this story. I was like, I don't really want to deal with them. I'm totally open to grace, but you're going to need to be very clearly honest with me. Yep. Because I'm also very prepared for vengeance. Yeah. So show me which way you want and make it obvious. And every time I have said that, the answer is so clear and obvious in that moment that it's just hard to avoid. Mm-hmm. So at this particular event, when the opportunity came up and it was very clearly grace, I remember looking over, seeing the signal, having a delay and being like, oh, really? Really? And then acting with grace. And it has done nothing but great things for me.
There is, men need men to run with. We do. We know the value of brotherhood, right? Friendship. It's just, God has blessed us with that gift. We need a spouse. God has blessed us and created us to be a husband, to a wife, and to experience all of that. None of that comes close with your relationship with the Lord.
Correct.
None of that comes close to, I have to one day cry out to God, and I have to hear him call my name and cause me to stand up. Nothing comes close to that, right? And so there's this, you have men that will either seek for guy groups or whatever, or they'll just get alone and they deal with themselves. But until men start calling out to the Lord, I don't think they're designed, I don't think God wants them. Forgive me, I'm not, hear me out here. I think there's a way that God works in his providence where he will allow us to go through our own suffering and hardship and even loneliness. And I'll say to complete despair. David cries out all the time in despair over the hardship that he's gone through and the things that he's experiencing. And he wants us to leverage that to come to a point where we call out to him.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah. 100%.
Because that's really, if he's the source of life, he has to do that for our good so that way we change.
Yeah.
If Travis isn't my source of life, then going to him over and over and over is not going to be the thing that changes my life. Right. Falling on my knees before the Lord and hearing his voice. We have the privilege right now of preaching through Psalms through the summer. We're going to preach through the verse 10, 11 Psalms. And the first 3, this weekend I get to preach through Psalm 3. And in chapter 1, it's very theoretical. It's all about if you do this, you'll be the blessed man. If you receive his word, if you read his word, if you abide in the word, if you live out those things, your life will be blessed, right? You'll be like a tree that's planted by living waters. Chapter 2, it's all theological. He's the king. Kiss the son, right? I've established my king to rule and reign over all this. Chapter 3 is very practical. It's the point of despair. My enemies have surrounded me. And in verse 3, he calls out to God, and God answers him. And I think there's an experience that all of us need. You can grow up in church. You can hear the word taught. You can know certain things. God, I know you're real. I hope you're not, because I don't like the guilt I'm feeling.
Yeah.
But until you come face to face to where you fall flat and you call out to him. You know what I mean? Because
100%.
you use the word providence. God really does work in very natural ways. Hey, man, go next door.
Yeah.
Hey, man, no, come back. Have a conversation.
Yep.
We overlook all of those things. And all of that we need to come to see that God is working in unique ways to draw us and quicken us and awaken us so that way we can live the life he wants us to live.
You know, a very good example I've used of trying to give that concept to other people. Coming from street racing, being fast.
Yeah.
You get somebody in front of me that slows me down or cuts me off, and driving an ambulance, because you'd be amazed at the number of people that apparently can't hear, can't see, don't recognize bright colors or lights. So road rage is kind of an issue, and I would find myself getting really angry in that moment. And then I started paying attention. Started paying attention to things around me, and I'd have somebody cut me off, and I'd be flying, 20 miles over the limit, and they'd slow me down, and I'd be mad, and I'd be yelling about it, cussing about it in the car, throwing my hands up.
Yeah.
Wanting to give them some sign language, that kind of stuff. And it'd be basically a rolling blockade. I cannot speed. And then we'd pass 2 state troopers. Yeah. And I'd be like,
what am I doing?
What am I doing? Mm-hmm. I've got this 500-foot view, and I've got somebody 10 million miles in the air seeing every interaction. So I've tried and I fail sometimes with the road rage thing, but I try very, very hard and diligently to just say, okay, I'm going to slow down. I don't know if I'm avoiding a wreck. Mm-hmm. I don't know. On an ambulance, I can't tell you the number of times I've been running emergency traffic and had to slow down because somebody pulled in front of me and then drive by another wreck on the way to the ER. Yeah. That could have been my ambulance. Yeah. And it's just paying attention and just keeping your eyes open for him. Maybe yes, and maybe more than what you're experiencing. I think going into Men Need Men, I think something that we men often have a hard time with is when we talk to God, it's almost like we're bargaining.
Sure.
And I bring people, I want to bring people to Abraham and Lot, Sodom and Gomorrah. What did Abraham do? It's if I can find 100 people, God said, okay. Well, maybe if I can find 50. Okay. Well, I bet I could find 25. Okay. How about 10? Okay. He just keeps bargaining. God's agreeing with him on everything, but he just keeps bargaining it down to this fine point. But I think that, the moral of that is that he's there. His mercy was as big as 100 people. He's the one that, Abraham's the one that drew it down. Yeah. So, I think the bargaining thing is something that is difficult. That's been hard for me to let go of in my prayer too. Hey, I can do this if you'll let me do that,
The process of that, if you look at it, God is loving to see his son, Abraham, get a vision of God's heart and interceding for 110 down to 1. And there's no one there, but him seeing that God was willing to listen to him. So he's stepping into sonship. Yep. He's grabbing the heart of the Father and trying to preserve a town. And God's like, yes, amen. Like that, my son is getting it. And he's teaching that lesson as we go. But it's the same thing as you just being like, God, if you're there, show me something. Make it obvious, because I'm dumb.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've prayed that exact prayer. I'm like, we are stupid.
Yeah.
And I genuinely want to do what you want me to do. But if you don't make it obvious, I'm going to miss it. But then that's on us as men to get in our Bibles, and then it's not as hard to miss it because you start to understand who he is and what he thinks and how he loves and what he does. And then you're more equipped to lead. Like you're talking about, you're leading a team now. And sometimes, they're paid, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they volunteer. But they want to come and do the events with you because they love the community that is the event, but also the team that you've created. And that's huge, man. You should feel thank God that he has used you and equipped you to do that, because Rich was that for you however long ago. Yep. And now you're creating that atmosphere for those around you and that brotherhood, that family unit that represents Christ to those around. you know?
Yeah.
Like that's huge.
Yeah. It's somewhat humbling sometimes.
Right?
You know,
Right.
It really
All the
is.
time?
Yeah. All the time.
Seriously.
And I really like frequently, and again, this is not tooting my own horn because I hate this, but people will introduce me to new events and they'll be like, hey, this is Hicks. If you're running an event, you need to check with him about safety and medical. He's your guy. He's the best in the business. God, I hate that. Mm-hmm. I hate being called the best in the business because I'm like, well, you kind of don't know what I do. And I'm not the best. I'm just doing the best I can with what I've got, and the best in the business is my team. It's not me. Mm-hmm. It's my team. I've assembled a group of very talented, passionate individuals, and they're a group of leaders, all the way down to the people that are just helping us on the field. There's always one. There's always one, sometimes two. Every event we do, I'll have new people come in, always one or two of them. You can see it on their face after they experience the team and they feel the operational standard and they feel how it works and that it's still fun.
Yeah.
Then they start this pipeline. And
what's cool in that, I want to encourage you in that. Like, I love the humbleness in that, but think of David, the 3, the 30, like David attracted those men.
Yeah.
But David attracted those men because of how David was. And like the things that you have created and instilled and are leading, and like, this is the standard, these are protocols that we do. Like, you've got that from God, and these are things that we won't waver on. And that then is creating the culture for these people to thrive and to become who God's called them to be,
Yeah.
But the honor and the glory in it is God through you. So when someone like brags on you, dude, it is an awesome chance to be like, it was all God. Let me tell you why. Let me tell you how. That's because I wouldn't be here,
Yeah, and we're working on like a product platform for dudes that we've been calling the standard, and we've been talking about these fitness and spiritual standards, about how there really is a level to which God has called men to live at. Like, when you think about your own internal character, when you think about your home, your wife, your kids, your finances, when you think about your relationships with other people out in the world, when you think about how you interact with the Word of God and prayer and being involved in a local church and discipling other people, that all of these areas are areas that God cares about, and He has a standard in regards to them. Like, He's called men to be pursuing excellence, which biblically speaking is just Christ-likeness, being like Jesus in all of these areas. But also, we always talk about the meme of the soldier carrying the wife and daughter, and then the dad carrying the flip-flops, and it's like, don't be this guy. Yeah. Well, God, like, you should be strong. You should be a guy who's capable, one, of defending, but also of just, as we were just talking about before, you're saying, like, seeing some guys from your class reunion, and one of them's like, sorry, honey, I can't pick you up. My back is bad. Done. Yeah. If you say that and then you turn around and say, yeah, I'm a Christian, I go, well, not a very good one. You know what I mean? Sure, maybe you get an accident, but you know what I mean? A lot of people didn't have an accident, or sciatica Wilson over here. But the reality of that being that God has called us to a standard, but we as men are called to be a standard bearer. In the old military terms, medieval times, think about the standard was actually the flag that was flown over the military as they marched into battle, and it have the crest of whoever you fought for. And that standard was, this is who they fight for, and that's why they operate this way. That's why they march this way. That's why they fight this way. That's why they dress this way. That's why they talk this way, because that's who they serve. And that's how God has designed us. But the reality is that a lot of men have not gotten to the point where they say, I'm not up to the standard. That mirror moment we were talking about, I'm not up to the standard. God, your son is the standard. Help me become like him. And what ends up happening is that you end up now, as you are walking towards that, as you're saying in your hip honesty, integrity, professionalism, as you walk towards that standard, you're bringing the other people that are under you along with you into that, right? I mean, that's the reality of life as a man, is that men don't have the choice of whether or not they lead. It's will they lead well, right? Even in the matriarchal societies in downtown Chicago, where apparently all of the women lead, they all stay inside because they're scared of the 14-year-old boys shooting up the streets who, ironically, are leading, right? Like all of these in every area of society, men lead. It's just, will they lead well? And so I think when a guy can recognize by grace-given humility to say, this is a low point. I'm not up to the standard. I want to be and I need to be. God, help me, right? That's a prayer God will answer. I want to be like Jesus. God's not going to go, no, you don't mean it enough. Well, we never mean it enough. But he will hear that prayer, and he will give you opportunity to rise to that standard and walk like Christ does so that you can bring other people with you. But I think it's just cool to hear in your story how you're able to represent that now only because of that moment of clarity to say, I'm not who I should be, who I want to be, who you've called me to be. Help me do that. And now to be able to turn around and communicate that to other people and say, no, I really was like that. I really wasn't the guy. I really was the bad guy in my story, but now I am one of the good guys because of Jesus Christ, right? Like that's huge. And I think that that's something that guys are on the precipice of, but that shame and that guilt and that fear and that love of the secret sin and that pride and all of that makes this cocktail that they keep drinking down that keeps them from being the man God called them to be.
And it takes a guy who was that to be like, hey, quit. Like, I'll tell you exactly what you're feeling and thinking and shame and everything because I was there. But there's a way out.
There's another way.
This is how you do it. It's real. It's authentic that way.
It is.
All right, gentlemen. Hicks, there's so much that I'd love to draw out of you and talk through. Where do you want to land this, man? What do you want to share with the guys as we close this out that is on your heart and mind?
I think I opened with that. I believe everybody's got their own cross to bear. And I think that it is important to find a group of men so that you don't have to bear it alone. Sometimes the cross is heavy, so maybe get your squats in. And I think that once you accept the role as a man, a godly man, you have also forfeited the right to be unfit in any area of your life.
Yeah.
Mental, spiritual, and physical. I don't think you can lead from a sedentary point in any of those. I just don't believe that that's something that a man should do. I've had very good examples in my life. My grandfather, my dad. My dad has seriously trampled some snakes in his life.
Wow.
That's cool. And I think at one point I probably was a garter snake, but he handled me well. He handled me well. And I don't think that I would be where I'm at without having examples like that. And I think that young men need that probably as much, if not more, than we do. In a world that promotes being fatherless, I believe that is something that a lot of men need to understand. Doesn't need to be blood, really. So, I think that's where leadership starts.
Well, if some of our followers want to check in on you and follow you and see what you're up to, where can they find you at, man?
Try to stay off of Facebook. Nothing good but marketplace happens on there. So,
which is the best part of Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram. It's pro_medic_Hicks with an X, Hix.
And if people see you, they're welcome to come up, say hi at an event,
Absolutely.
Talk to you about Lion of War.
Yeah, absolutely.
What'd you think of book 4?
I haven't finished it yet.
Okay, where you at?
I am about 5 chapters in.
Okay.
And I'm intentionally not touching it until Saturday or Sunday because me and my family are going to the beach. So doing that. So I'm looking very forward to that. I hope that it'll last the whole week. I'm gonna guess probably 2 days. So I messaged Cliff when we were working Syndicate Ground down in Knoxville because we had got done one day a little early, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get a great night's sleep before tomorrow's real kickoff day. And then I proceeded to set up until 12:30 at night reading the book because it literally arrived as I was leaving for Syndicate. So I just took it with me.
Oh, man.
So, yeah, I told him I was probably going to be exhausted tomorrow, and I blame you. And
toward the
job.
end, I think it's my favorite part so far in the series. You'll find it toward the end of the book.
awesome. And I'm looking forward.
good.
When I was on his podcast the other day, I told him I'm really looking forward to Jawbone because I loved Boundary of Blood.
Sure.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to
Rich
it.
and Cliff just did an interview together. In fact, it just went live today.
Yeah, Rich, actually, I got off the call with Cliff so he could get on the call with Rich.
Did you really?
That's funny.
Not that I'm more important. I just happened first.
You gotta tell him.
But you
that.
came
Tell him
first.
that every
There you
time.
go.
I
You
texted
were
him.
after me, Rich.
I texted him. I was like, "Have fun in your interview."
That's
That's
good.
awesome.
But yeah,
All right, guys. Well, this is the Man of God podcast, and the man that we're following is Jesus. He's the one that we chase after. He's the one that we follow. So get after it. Follow Christ, take dominion, die daily, and learn to rule well in the image of God.